I don't know where they get all these people from to debate with Douglas Murray, but here's another one to show you. This guy is not fit to carry his water bottles, let alone debate with him. This time we've got Enver Suleiman, who can't even get his name right, let alone make a good argument. He's the CEO of the Refugee Council, so it's no surprise he's in favour of illegal immigration. As usual, Douglas destroys all his arguments, or should I say his untruths. This debater is not as aggressive and insulting as the others, but he contradicts himself and comes across as disingenuous and sly, especially with that smirk. Here's the first clip.
They come here, whether that's through so-called regular routes or the irregular routes that Charles is so seems to be so angry about.
You'll find, first of all, it's Douglas.
Sorry, Douglas.
And secondly, that it's not an irregular route.
Just let me finish. The irregular routes.
Good, I just wanted you to get my name right first.
Sorry, I do apologise. That was my oversight. It wasn't an intended mistake. Sorry, Douglas. Those irregular routes that people come here to, whether that's from Afghanistan or other countries, what we find is when they arrive here, they are hugely grateful for the support that this country is offering them, and they want to make a contribution. They want to do right by this country, and they simply want to rebuild their lives. You know, I don't want to have an argument about what is true and untrue. I want to have an argument about the reality based on our work. And, you know, I'm sat here from Leeds today. We're welcoming a family that's coming in from Lebanon, from a refugee camp today. They will arrive, they will be taken to a home in York, supported by the council. And I'm certain that that family will go on to make an active contribution.
Sure. Well, Enver, you said you didn't want to talk about facts or what was true and what wasn't true. You said you wanted to talk about your work. But let me introduce a fact to it, which is that what you've just said, again, is incorrect. A study from University College London 10 years ago showed that over the previous 2 decades, the amount of money that migrants took out of the state in benefits was hundreds of millions of pounds less than what they paid in taxation. Sorry, hundreds of £1 million more than what they paid in taxation. It takes years for a migrant into the UK to pay back in taxation what they take out in benefits. It's very basic economics, this. The University College London study proved this. It doesn't even require a study from a university. It simply requires any observation of the facts. That the moment that you come into the UK and start using UK facilities and UK services, you are taking money out of the UK taxpayer's pot. And you may pay some of that back in. You may, in rare cases, pay all of it in. But the idea that migrants, particularly illegal migrants, arrive in the UK and become a net benefit to the UK is a fallacy. The benefits of migration of this kind, financially, accrue solely to the migrant and the family of the migrant. They do not come to the UK.
About those that get refugee status, and that is
what is the financial net benefit?
That is a specific group of individuals who are given status. They're given indefinite leave to remain for 5 years, and then they go on to be given status here.
What is the net economic benefit to Britain? I can understand why it's in their interest, but why is it in Britain's interest?
Why is it in Britain's interest to allow those that are fleeing war and oppression to come here,
I said financially,
to rebuild their lives?
We could discuss the ethical issue all day, and I think we might disagree on it because I don't think we can give
I
asked you what the evidence is of the economic benefits of migrants who enter the UK illegally contributing to the UK economy.
I'm not talking about migrants who enter the UK illegally. You're talking at cross purposes to me, Douglas. I'm talking about individuals who come here, who make a claim for refugee protection and get refugee status.
Okay.
And are here,
so what is the economic benefit to the UK there?
And are here as individuals with legal, legitimate rights to be here.
And in that group, what is the net economic benefit to the UK?
They make a huge benefit to the UK.
What is it?
Through a whole range. I don't have the data to hand, the data that you were referring to.
Fancy saying I'm not interested in talking about facts and then making statements without being able to back them up with figures. What a strange thing to say. Next, we get to the years-old tripe that they are all doctors and surgeons. Again, Douglas points out is nonsense.
And indeed, today, in the front line, in the fight against COVID, if you look at people working in the NHS, there are Afghan doctors who had no choice but to get here in the back of a lorry. There are people who came from Iran fleeing oppression, who are top-level surgeons. And indeed, if you look across the arts, if you look across education, if you look across business, there are many refugees who are making an incredible contribution to this country, proud to be Britons, playing by the rules, paying their taxes and contributing to this country in an incredible way. And it's very important that as a nation, we continue 7 decades after the UN Convention to stick to that key principle that, as I say, many Conservative Prime Ministers have continued to stick to, which is if you come here with a case for refugee protection, you are given a fair hearing.
There are two important things to say about that. The first is just to address the fiction that the arrivals coming over by boat from France are all going to end up being surgeons, doctors, leading academics and statisticians and much more. And it's not the case. It's the fantasy of the pro-open borders lobby that everybody
Charles, can I just say,
can...
sorry to interrupt, but I'm not advocating pro-borders. What I'm simply advocating, if you let me finish, please, Charles, come on, you've had a lot to say. What I'm advocating is the UN Convention on Refugees. Now, the UN Convention on Refugees, just let me finish, please let me make my point. I'm not interrupting you. The UN Convention on Refugees is very clear, and it upholds the principle that if you are fleeing oppression, war, terror, and you come to this country, you can make a claim for protection. By no means am I advocating open borders, because if people don't have a legitimate claim for protection or a need for protection, absolutely they should be sent back to the country from which they have come from, and they should be supported to do that.
I'm very glad to hear you say that, but yet you're encouraging the breaking of the law and the breaking of the asylum procedures by advocating, or indeed encouraging, the illegal movement of people across the channel. And as I say, we have an asylum system. I think
the UN Convention is not breaking the law.
Please, you said a moment ago that you hadn't interrupted me, and you just have again. It's extremely deleterious for our country to be in a situation where we encourage the breaking of the law by migrants who you then pretend afterwards are going to never break the law again and are all going to become doctors and surgeons. But people you talked about who come from, for instance, Afghanistan have, as I say, walked across multiple safe countries. They are looking at Europe as a buffet that they choose from, not as a haven to try to reach. And it is exceptionally important that we as a country understand this in the modern context. You keep talking about context. Let's address the context. The context we are in now is very different from that 7 decades ago. We have not just the ability to see how the rest of the world is living through our smartphones and much more, and people across Africa have these devices, but we can go and move around much more easily than at any time previously. In the current era, there are people from across the Middle East, the Far East, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, all wishing to move to Europe, and Britain is one of the countries they would like to come to. 1/3 of people in Sub-Saharan Africa, polled by Gallup last year, said they would like to move. They do not want to move to the Middle East, they want to move to Europe, they want to move northwards. Now, my suggestion is that in that context, Britain has to be realistic about what our capabilities are of providing a haven for the world's poor, dispossessed, and much more. I think we are a small country. We should have small ambitions about this. We cannot be the haven for anyone in the world who wishes to have a better life to come in and try to make that better life here. It's impossible, but as I say, we've been running on the polite fiction of recent decades, and I'd like us not to keep up that fiction.
What I have noticed is the open borders lot say one thing, then when you expose it as a lie, they have a ready excuse to justify that lie. Firstly, it was they are all women and children. Then when it was proved they were mostly adult men, they said, so what, men need refuge too. Okay, if that's the case, why lie in the first place? Then they said they are all fleeing war and death. And then when people replied they are coming from France and there is no war there, once busted, they replied, well, maybe they have family in the UK and can speak English, and that they shouldn't have to stay in the first safe country they come to. So every time you expose their lies, they have a ready excuse. So how can we trust a word they say? At least base your arguments on the facts. Finally, Douglas compendiously explains what the UK should do to stop the boats.
And Douglas, in your piece, you talk about the need for a tougher response in terms of the government's response. What do you think they should be considering?
A whole range of proposals. The first is they could follow the example the Greeks have set in the last couple of years and simply turn around the boats in the channel. That would be much preferable to the British Coast Guard effectively acting as a wing of the smuggling operation by picking people up a few miles into the channel and then ferrying them to the UK. They could try to follow the Australian precedent and offshore people wishing to come, make sure that their applications are processed elsewhere than on British soil, because as everyone knows, in actual fact, once you're in, it's extremely hard for the British government to repatriate. It's all sorts of reasons why they don't do it and why it ends up not happening and being kicked down the road. And another option is to follow our colleagues and friends in Denmark, who have managed to introduce numerous restrictions in recent years to ensure that migration into Denmark has gone down by something like 9 times in the last few years. Australia, Greece, Denmark, these are all also very distinguished liberal democracies. They all have a fine liberal tradition, and they've also realised that they can hold on to the principle of legality and of borders, and that they can do so without anyone but a relatively small fringe of people claiming that they are some kind of beyond the pale countries.
So there you have it. We must now ask the question, why is our government not doing anything about this? Greece and Denmark are putting a stop to this madness, and it's not like the world is treating them like Russia. The fact is, the government hasn't the will to stop the boats because they don't believe they should be stopped. They just pretend to the public they do because they are desperate for our votes. We all know the bottom line is the numbers are only going to go up.